Conversation I have seen a lot of people discussing lately is, well, is D4 finally saved? Is D4 no longer bad? Has the game finally earned our money? No. Well, kind of. D4 dads are definitely not going to like this video. Look, I've covered Diablo 4 extensively in the past, from the highs of its pre-release, where I was glazing the game like it was the second coming, probably shouldn't have said it like that, to the abrupt disappointment that we were met with when the game was finally released. But Diablo 4 has improved a lot since the game has been out. It's gotten a lot of really good updates, and just recently with Diablo 4 Loot Reborn, we're finally starting to see what I would consider as 1.0 version of Diablo 4 almost a year later. And while the game has definitely improved, is it enough to be able to change the way that players view Diablo 4? No. Will it ever be enough? Maybe. There's a lot of questions that still linger in the background. Is Diablo 4 stepping in the right direction? Is it finally on the path to redemption? Is the game finally going to earn the money that we spent on the game? Or is Diablo 4 simply on a treadmill, improving itself over time, but ultimately not going anywhere? I can't believe I'm saying this, but after playing Diablo 4 Season 4 Loot Reborn, I'm genuinely impressed. If I had to give a concise thought on its improvements, I'd simply say that the game just feels better to play. On launch, and for now the better part of a year, Diablo 4 just felt bad. Leveling was slow, stats were convoluted, play felt aimless, everything in the game was poorly implemented, it lacked quality of life, and oftentimes the game just felt like it was extending your playtime, doing menial tasks rather than doing what you're there to do, which is slay demons. For the better part of a year, Diablo 4 was a game that required 1,000 steps to walk 2 feet. But with its latest seasonal update, many of those steps have been removed, barriers to fun have been lifted, and I think it's important to give the game its due. The stat rework and the reduction of affixes while making itemization a little bit more boring, not that it was all that interesting to begin with, makes the overall experience of finding loot now much more enjoyable. In the past, 95, more like 99% of the things that we would find would be useless. However, now I'm constantly finding things that will impact my build in one way, shape, or form. One of the core issues for me at the very beginning of the game when it first launched was the odd complexity of the various affixes. You know, those weird conditional affixes Blizzard previously had in the game. Now that it's more simplified, I can quickly just compare a couple of items and decide which is better without having to have a hierarchy of affixes right next to me to look to see what's going to impact my build the best. Now, along with the stat rework, we got greater affixes, tempering, and masterworking. Greater affixes give us the chance to be able to roll on stats with a higher ceiling, and masterworking and tempering give us the chance to put on unique conditional affixes onto an item to improve them, ultimately having a massive impact on our build and being able to specialize into those builds. A system wholly ripped from last epoch and made a little bit less interesting, but a welcome change nevertheless, and a sign that Blizzard is finally going back to doing what they do best, stealing somebody else's ideas to improve their games because, well, they haven't had a creative thought since they ran out of milk.
We're out of milk.
Masterworking, as well as the changes to the affix pool, give Diablo 4 an actual crafting system, something that the game really needed from the start and caused a lot of unnecessary suffering for a lot of players. This system can be improved, but largely speaking, it's giving players the autonomy to be able to build the builds that they want to be able to make. With that said, I have noticed that there is an inherent weakness with all of this because the longer I play, the higher level you get, the less interesting the gear is on the ground because the crafting system is now the actual gearing system. And you're really not going to find anything all that interesting outside of Uber Uniques, or if you get super lucky and find something that drops with a couple of greater affixes. Now, while I have enjoyed the stat and crafting changes, I think the biggest improvements to the game that just make the game feel a heck of a lot better is the quality of life issues that they've solved and fixed that still to this day, I have no idea how they made it into the game at launch. But with that said, we now have stash tabs. XP has been increased. Drops have been increased. We can salvage items and get everything we want from them rather than having to take them to individual vendors to be able to pull off certain things. Legendary affixes and gems no longer clutter our inventory. Vendors aren't 30 miles away from each other, and oftentimes they're in the exact same building or just a couple feet outside the door. Horses can run in town. Mob density is higher, and the hell tides are more engaging. All these changes substantially improve the player experience and have left me really enjoying the game right now. Diablo 4 at launch and then up until just recently just felt so damn tedious to play. You'd play for hours and hours and feel like you accomplished absolutely nothing. And it was because of how far everything was in between one another, how barren and boring the open world was, and there really wasn't any reason to be out there in the first place. So then we were trapped in nightmare dungeons. You'd go back to town to be able to manage your gear, but all the vendors are so far apart from one another that it'd take an hour to be able to salvage and then put things back into your inventory and then move your gems around and your affix shards around and all that stuff. And now with all of that friction removed, the game just feels so much better to play. And look, I'm not going to let it go that it took this long for them to be able to fix the game to the point that they have. It really does feel like we've been playing beta testing this game for over a year for $70. But with that said, yeah, the game feels a lot better. Just the change alone to the towns, making the vendors right next to each other. Oh my God. Oh, how did they not notice it sooner? Well, it's easy. It's because this game has been trying to pretend that it's not what it is. It's been trying to pretend that it's not Diablo 3 wearing an open world Scooby-Doo mask. I think one of the reasons why Diablo 4 disappointed so many people was simply because it failed to meet the expectations set by both Blizzard and the players. With millions of dollars in marketing, how frequently they paid homage to Diablo 2, how far the genre had evolved since the release of Diablo 3, anyone would have expected that this latest next-generation entry should have been the god of ARPGs, and what was released was just a decent game. It looked good, it sounded good, it played well enough, but the longer you played it, the more you noticed how shallow the game was and how counterintuitive many of the systems were. It really was a game that was just to be played for its campaign, and then nothing really after that. A major criticism of mine that I made quite frequently was that Diablo 4 suffered from an identity crisis. Too much of the game was trying to appease two different crowds with two different tastes, the casual and the enthusiast. The developers likely wanted to try to meet veteran player expectations, even though the creative minds behind Diablo 2 were long gone by now, but they also, at the same time, wanted to make sure that they could appeal to a wider, more casual audience that desires something that's more palatable and easier to play. To put it plainly, they got greedy. They wanted all of the players and didn't zero in on a target audience, leaving the game with no real identity and appealing to no one rather than anyone. That lack of identity and personality make for an incredibly difficult game to develop. If you think about it, many of the things that made Diablo 4 unenjoyable could be boiled down to using annoyances to create the illusion of challenge or complexity. Far too many developers today will try to make something complex for the sake of complexity or try to make something obtusely difficult to feign a challenge. Developers are doing this either lack the vision to achieve their desired goal, or they're doing it because they want something to look complex to attract the players that want that kind of thing, but at the same time not actually make it complex so it's playable for casual players. So let me explain. On launch, players are met with an absurd amount of conditional affixes, most of them being completely useless because they were there to imitate the complexity of Path of Exile without having any of the functional depth. Boss attacks in Diablo 4 aren't clearly telegraphed. They have bad hitboxes. They're hidden by poor coloring, or skills are layered on top of one another, making it difficult to distinguish one attack from another, ultimately making the game more confusing and difficult to understand, rather than approachable yet challenging. The objective here was to make the game feel complex and difficult, rather than be either of those things. Blizzard wanted the game to look one way and play another in an attempt to appease both veterans and the casual audience at the exact same time. Now, it's not impossible to make a game that's both complex and challenging while still making it palatable for wider audiences. FromSoft has been doing this for years with ease. You can play their games without knowing the vast intricacies of itemization, character builds, the narrative, and mechanics, or you can be Vati Vidya. These things can be done, but it requires leadership with a clear vision, and I don't think that Blizzard has that right now. Or at least they didn't have it when they were developing the game the first time around. What I think is important here is that Diablo 4 didn't need to be that game that they were trying to envision. It doesn't need to be Diablo 2 reimagined in an open world or the casual player's Path of Exile. It just needs to be fun, and I feel like they finally started to embrace that with Season 4. And these recent changes to the game are reflections of Diablo 3 more than they are of anything else. Player hubs feel smaller, loot feels more plentiful, the game feels simple, and shit, I mean, the Iron Wolves are no different than Diablo 4's Season that are edging you towards a very specific build, and hell, I mean, they brought back greater rifts in the form of the Pit. Diablo 3 was an incredibly easy game to play, and I realize it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but I liked it. It was great for couch co-op. It was great to play with friends over the weekend. It was low commitment. Was it the best game ever? No. Far from it. But it was fun, and that's one of the things that Diablo 4 has been missing this entire time, and I'm happy to see that they're finally touching grass, looking back, thinking to themselves, this game has to have an identity for it to have any type of consistent audience, especially as a live service game. And that's what they've been doing with this. I'm happy to see that the D4 team's taken the direction of Diablo 3 with the game, because that's what they probably should be doing, because you're not going to compete with Path of Exile or Last Epoch for that matter. And if you think about it, that lack of identity really was the main issue with this game. It just felt so damn aimless to play. You'd often ask yourself, why am I even playing it in the first place? It was a jack of all trades, master of none, and shit at most, to be honest with you. And now they finally dialed in on the things that matter most, which is, well, having achievable goals for the players, not having to take a century to be able to achieve them, and letting them just go kill stuff. Because that's what we're here to do in the first place. Kill stuff and get loot. And there were so many barriers to that when the game had first launched, and even still up until just recently. But now those barriers are gone, and the game feels so much better as a result of it. This is their first opportunity to actually get a really consistent player base if they wanted to get one. But with that said, I don't think this is enough to save Diablo from the image that it's crafted for itself. There's an entire year of a game being bad is just not good, and it takes a long time to be able to dig yourself out of that hole. Pre-launch Diablo 4 was a hype train riding on an unfinished railroad. The game released at peak excitement. However, as time went on, it didn't take long for the cracks to show, the paint to wear off, and for players to realize that there really wasn't a whole lot of thought that went into the game past its campaign. Anytime you have epic highs and colossal lows, players will never forget that whiplash experience, and it doesn't help with just how strong the D4 bad meme became. When your reputation is as bad as both Blizzard and Diablo's, regardless of how resilient Blizzard fans are, it's going to take a lot more than a few good updates to erase that bad reputation. Diablo 4 has improved significantly since launch. However, it's been almost a year since this game has been out, and it's taken this long for it to earn any level of respect. A game that many players paid well over $70 for. I remember how many people logged in on the first day of early access, and it's felt like the game has been in beta for the entire year that it's been out. And there's still a lot of issues that the game has and still faces to this day. Personally, I don't think the Diablo team is capable of success with the live service model. Many players that have been returning to the game are returning for the changes to the core systems, not for the season itself. And that's largely because the seasonal content that they put out lacks any creativity or excitement. The seasons thus far have felt like half-baked ideas, with some instances that make me question whether or not they even know what fun is. Season of the Malignant was a fart in the wind. Season of Blood was uninspired and contrived. Season of the Construct was the most annoying idea ever put into a video game. And Season of Loot Reborn is really just Diablo 3. If Blizzard wants to make Diablo 4 a successful live service game, then they need to not only continue to address the ongoing issues the game still faces, but it's now growing more imperative by the day that they make their seasons more interesting, their battle passes more exciting and rewarding for both free and paid versions. And seriously, they need to look at their cosmetic shop and their pricing. As it stands, the seasons suck, the cosmetics suck, and everything in the game is too expensive for you to justify buying it in the first place. Back in December, I made a video criticizing a poll that Blizzard had put out, asking players how they felt about different pricing and incentive combinations. They were testing to see how people would want to spend money on Diablo 4's first expansion. The base price sitting around $50 and topping out at around over $100. Now, while I still don't think Diablo 4 justifies a $50 price tag for an expansion, I mean, Elden Ring's upcoming expansion is going to be $40, and we know what kind of value we're going to get out of that. The price completely outweighs what we can realistically expect from a Diablo 4 expansion. With that said, an expansion is exactly what this game needs to be able to give itself a reset in the eyes of the consumer and begin with a fresh start again. Diablo 4 has a long road ahead of it. It's improving, but it's nowhere near the finish line. Players paid money. Blizzard needs to earn it. And here's to hoping that a new expansion doesn't undo all of the work that they've done up until now. I've had a lot of fun with Diablo 4 Season 4. But with that said, if I had to give Blizzard any sort of advice, it would be keep everything from this season moving forward. And I mean everything. Keep the Hell Tides the way that they are. Keep the rewards the way that they are. Keep the Iron Wolves the same thing. Keep that where it is, because That gives player the option to be able to kind of pick up different items. It makes things a little bit more interesting. It makes leveling a lot more faster. It gives the developers an opportunity to be able to refresh that Iron Wolves reputation grind and give players new builds or something that the developers want players to play with for each different class and stuff like that. There's a ton of really cool things that should definitely stay, and all these other things should stay. You now have a great foundation, and what I would do is make sure that you're making interesting seasons. Bring out some wild mechanic. I mean, flip the game on its head. If you need to revamp a zone or bring out the cows, do it, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to keep players coming back. And that's one of the problems that this game has been facing. And, you know, lately I've been covering a lot of Helldivers 2. Recently I just got into Warframe, and it's really got me thinking, like, how do these live service games not do better? Like, imagine if you could actually farm platinum, the currency in Diablo 4 for the premium shop. Imagine if you could farm that in-game. If it was a rare drop from bosses or a rare drop from different enemies or completing different activities. But the problem is their battle pass is just so damn boring. God, it's so bad. Oh, let me get my ashes. Let me get my little bit of platinum if I'm playing on the free pass. It's just so contrived. Give players more options to be able to get your premium currency, and they'll use it. But the problem is right now, as it stands, when it's only locked behind either you buying it or getting it from the battle pass, people just aren't going to want to engage with it. And when the cosmetics look as garbage as they often do, even more reason for players not to want to have anything to do with it. It's one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed playing Helldivers 2, because there's a chance for me to get that premium currency while I'm playing the game. What does that do? That makes players play the game more often and play it longer and stay in the game so they can farm some of that currency and get ready for the next seasonal pass. It's a cycle. It keeps players in. If they did something like that, heck, it'd probably revitalize the game's live service significantly so, to be honest with you. But yeah, here I am giving you guys good ideas. Here's to me hoping you listen or watch this video. I don't know, Asmongold probably will. He likes this kind of stuff. You talk about it. They'll listen to you. Anyway, Diablo 4's finally starting to find itself. I've had a lot of fun playing it. I'm still actually going to play it. I'm going to get to level 100. I'm going to do all the bosses and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm happy to see the game where it is right now. I've gone from apathetic about the future of Diablo 4 to mildly curious to see where things go from here. That's a massive improvement. So congrats to the team for what they've pulled off so far, but you're not out of the hole just yet. What do you guys think? Anyway, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. And I guess I'll see you in Sanctuary. Peace.
Family, 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 family.